Carlism was a traditionalist and legitimist political movement in Spain seeking the establishment of a separate line of the Bourbon dynasty on the Spanish throne. This line descended from Don Carlos, Count of Molina, and was founded due to dispute over the succession laws and widespread dissatisfaction with the Alfonsine line of the House of Bourbon. The movement was at its strongest in the 1830s but had a revival following Spain's defeat in the Spanish-American War in 1898, when Spain lost its last remaining significant overseas territories of Cuba, Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico to the United States. An exceptionally long-lived movement. Carlism, however, also had a lot of opposition from other royalists who acknowledged that the successors of Isabel II of Spain had a legitimate right to the throne, being the senior heirs general of King Charles IV of Spain. Moreover, if the semi-Salic inheritance, which was used by the Carlists to justify the claim to the throne, was applied, then the Bourbons would not have come to the Spanish throne in the first place. After all, upon the death of the Habsburg King Charles II of Spain, semi-Salic agnatic succession would have meant that the Habsburg Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, would have become King of Spain, and his daughter Maria Theresa and her successors would have become Spanish monarchs. The semi-Salic law would have allowed this given the fact that Maria Theresa was the last member of the House of Habsburg. Carlism was a significant force in Spanish politics from 1833 until the end of the Francoist regime in 1975. In this capacity, it was the cause of Carlist wars during the 19th century, and an important factor in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. Today, Carlists are considered by some to be a fringe entity, with Carlist claimants supported only by the most reactionary of the Spanish nobility, though this continues to be disputed. Origins. The dynastic issue systems of succession in dispute. Traditionally, all but one of the Spanish kingdoms allowed the succession of daughters in the absence of sons and of sisters in the absence of brothers. The most elaborate rules of succession formed part of the Siete Partidas of the late 13th century. On the 1st of November 1700, of French Bourbon Prince Philip V acceded to the Spanish throne. In the French royal house, Salic law applied, which did not permit female succession. Accordingly, the traditional Spanish order of succession had to give way to a semi-Salic system, which excluded women from the crown unless all males in the agnatic descent from Philip in any branch became extinct. This change was probably forced by external pressure to avoid any possible personal union of the crown of Spain with a foreign monarchy like France, broke out to prevent Spain and France from uniting the two realms under the same king. Although the Spanish government made several attempts to revert to the traditional order, as in the decree of 1789 by Charles IV of Spain, the succession question only became pressing when, by 1830, Ferdinand VII found himself ailing, without any issue, but with a pregnant wife. He decided in 1830 to promulgate the 1789 decree, securing the crown for the unborn child even if female. The law placed the child, Princess Isabel, ahead of Ferdinand's brother Infante Carlos, who until then had been heir presumptive. Many contemporaries saw the changed succession as illegal on various counts. They formed the basis for the dynastic Carlist party, which only recognized the semi-Salic succession law that gave Infante Carlos precedence over Ferdinand's daughter, the future Isabella II. Historical timeline: the 13th of May 1713, Philip V, first of the Spanish Bourbons, together with the Cortes, Spain's Parliament, through an auto-acordado, changes the order of succession to the Spanish crown from that outlined in the Siete-Partidos, where the previous rule consisted of male preference primogeniture. Philip's new law instituted semi-salic law, under which accession of a female or her descendants is only possible following the extinction of all dynastic males descended in the male line. From Philip V, 1789, during the reign of Charles IV, the Cortes approves a reversion of the system of succession to the traditional Siete-Partidos order of succession. However, the law was not promulgated, due in part to protests from the cadet branches of the House of Bourbon, who saw it as diminishing the hereditary rights. 1812. A new Spanish constitution outlines the rules of succession in accordance with the Siete-Partidos. The 31st of March 1830, Ferdinand VII, at the time without issue and his fourth wife pregnant, promulgates the Pragmatic Sanction of 1830, which ratifies the 1789 law, thereby re-establishing the pre-Philippine order of succession. The 10th of October 1830, the future Isabel II is born to Ferdinand VII. After several court intrigues, the Pragmatic Sanction is definitively approved in 1832. Ferdinand's brother, the Infante Don Carlos, up to that time the heir presumptive, feels robbed of his rights, and leaves for Portugal. The political issue, Carlism, confronted not only the question of who could legitimately sit on the Spanish throne, but was also about the principles on which Spanish society was built. Should it remain Roman Catholic or embrace Enlightenment values? Do governments derive the power from God or from human beings? Political landscape after the death of Ferdinand VII. As in many European countries after the Napoleonic occupation, the Spanish political class was split between the absolutists, supporters of the ancient regime, and the liberals, influenced by the ideas of the French Revolution. The long war for Spain's independence from the Napoleonic Empire left a large supply of experienced guerrilla fighters and an oversized military, officialdom, for the most part, staunch liberals. The perceived success of the uprising of 1808 against Napoleon left also a broad, if unconscious, belief in the validity of the right of rebellion, with long-lasting effects on the politics of Spain and Spanish America, extending through the 19th century and beyond. The reign of Ferdinand VII proved unable to overcome the political divide or to create stable institutions. The so-called liberal triennium reinstated the 1812 constitution after a military pronunciamiento, but was followed by the Omnis Decade, 10 years of absolute rule by the king, that left bitter memories of persecution in both parties. While in power, both groups had divided themselves into moderate and radical branches. A radical branch of the absolutists, known as the Apostolicos, looked upon the heir presumptive, Don Carlos, as its natural head, as he was profoundly devout and, especially after 1820, staunchly anti-liberal. In 1827, Catalonia was shaken by the rebellion of the Agrujats, or Agraviados, an ultra-absolutist movement, which, for a time, controlled large parts of the region. The Infante was for the first time then hailed as king. He denied any involvement. The last years of King Ferdinand saw a political realignment due to the troubles surrounding his succession. In October 1832, the king formed a moderate royalist government under Francisco C. Bermudez, which almost succeeded in curbing the Apostolic Party and, through an amnesty, in gaining liberal support for Isabella's right to succeed under the regency of her mother, Maria Cristina of Bourbon to Sicilies. If only to get rid of Don Carlos, the liberals accepted the new Princess of Asturias. Moreover, the first years of the 1830s were influenced by the failure of the French Restoration, which meant the end of Bourbon rule in France. and the civil war in Portugal between both legitimist and liberal parties. Social and economic factors. Beside this political evolution, the years before the Carlist Wars were marked by a deep economic crisis in Spain, partly spurred by the loss of the continental American provinces, and by the bankruptcy of the state. The last triggered enhanced tax pressures which further fueled social unrest. Certain economic measures proposed by the liberals were directly threatening the viability of many small farms, whose residents were accustomed to rely on the common pasture lands to feed, at little or no cost, the mules and oxen. Widespread poverty followed, as did the closure of most hospitals, schools and other charities. An important factor was the religious question. Radical liberals after 1820 had grown more and more anti-clerical, strongly opposing religious institutes. They were suspected of being adherents of Freemasonry. In the face of the governmental financial chaos, Spanish high-ranking governmental officials negotiated the increased participation of the Rothschild financiers of England and France in a bailout on Spain. Solvency was a sticking point in negotiations with the rising family of international creditors, with the Spanish government officials in turn arranging to privatize public lands, estates of religious companies, and communal exploitations, going on to assault the last region out of Spanish sovereignty with its own governmental structures, taxation and regulations, i.e., the Basque districts. The ore mines in Biscay became part of the deal and a coveted target. These takeover policies alienated the Basques with the specific political status and municipality-based government, as well as many sectors of the Spanish people, especially in rural areas. Catholicism was seen as representing the institutions and guarantees of the sinking ancient regime. The only institution abolished in the liberal triennium that was not restored by Ferdinand VII was the Inquisition. One of the demands of the radical absolutist party was its reinstitution. Liberals had been, while in power, quite doctrinaire, pursuing centralization and uniform administration. Besides the Basque country, in many regions of Spain there were intense particularist feelings, which were thus hurt, while only a secondary factor at the outbreak of the First Carlist War. This anti-uniformist localism, exemplified in the defense of the fueros, would become in time one of the more important banners of Carlism. This won Carlism support in the Basque territories, as well as the old realms of the Crown of Aragon, as those areas resented the abolition of their ancient self-government privileges by issuance of the Nueva Planta decrees.